So we've been talking about enjoying the presence and hospitality of Jesus and generously sharing it with others. And last week at our annual January meeting, we adopted this as our theme for the year, maybe for 2 or 3 years. And we said, of all the good things that we can be about, we're going to emphasize these things. These aren't the only things, right? Because this doesn't say read your Bible, pray, it just says enjoy it. So this is a theme, this is a focus. This is where we're headed together. We're linking arms and we're saying, what can we do to really emphasize this? It's actually what, to some degree, we've done well in the past, and we're doing well now, but can be improved upon. And we think God is actually calling us to be more and more about this. I've actually heard from people who say, not just people who come and they've said, yeah, I said, have you felt welcome at our church? Like, do you feel comfortable? And I really feel comfortable. I feel welcomed. I feel like people of all ages have said. Now, I hope that's the case for everyone. There may be people who are not here, who have voted with their feet and they're not among us, and they've said, no, that wasn't a very friendly, hospitable place. That can happen. And we're going to keep working on that because we're not perfect, not individually or as a community. But we want to enjoy the presence and hospitality of Jesus and generously share it with others. So being with Jesus and becoming like him, because by the way, that's the goal for all of us, is becoming more like Jesus. Spend time with him, become like him, do what he did and do what he would do if he was us, okay? And when we are like him, we become more relational, incarnational, and hospitable. We're more and more interested in relationship with others because love God, love your neighbor, relationship, that's all that's going to last is relationships in eternity. Incarnational means we're present to people. We're within proximity of people. For introverts, it's probably not going to be a huge number of people. For extroverts, maybe it'll be more people. But we're not going to be apart from people. There's no place in the Christian life for a Christian who doesn't become part of a church community or doesn't relate to people around them. That's not a thing, okay? We may go through seasons of depression, and I'm there, when I've needed more space from people. There are people who've needed isolation, or needed a break or a Sabbath or a sabbatical. That's understandable. But the general rule is we connect with people in the way that God's created us to. Relational, incarnational, and hospitable. Remember, Jesus was the most hospitable person in all history, and he didn't own a house, a car, his own pantry, none of that stuff. And yet everywhere he went, oh, here, let's multiply this food for the 5,000 plus people. Oh, here, let's get some more wine for this party. Or, oh, let's go to your place for a party. And then he became the host at somebody else's party. He was just constantly hospitable. Or he would say, what is it you need me to do for you? Okay, so he was always in that posture of hosting conversations, asking questions so that he could host the conversation. Now, he was also able to receive, was he not? Mm-hmm. Okay, so there's some give and take in our walk with Christ. It's not all giving. I do know people who can't receive because they've got to one-up everybody on giving. That's an extreme, okay? Some people are all takers and they never seem to give. Other people are all givers and don't seem to ever be able to receive. And for somebody to give, somebody's got to receive. So be a receiver. Somebody gives you some cookies, send it back, the plate empty, and say, thank you, that was such a good gift. You have really gifted us. You don't have to one up. Now, of course, it's nice when that happens, you reciprocal hospitality. But once in a while, let yourself off the hook and let that person be the one who gave more to you. That's a gift. By the way, that goes along with borrowing things from your neighbors. Some people as Christians think, well, we've always got to be the one lending and giving the money and doing this and doing that. And you know what? Do you like people who always give to you and never let you give to them, or vice versa? There's got to be a give and take. In relationship, we need to have that give and take. It's okay. I'll go to my neighbor and say, hey, I notice you've got that thing. No pressure, but would you allow me to use that? In other words, I'm in debt to them, right? They don't have to be in debt to me all the time for me to be a good Christian. You could say, it's okay for me to borrow from them and for them to say, I was helpful to you as a neighbor. That's part of neighboring. I hope you can understand that. That was Jesus. He did this. He received Mary, Martha, Lazarus, constantly receiving from them. Everywhere he went, people were looking out for him. And yet he was also hosting other people. So relational, incarnational, hospitable. Remember, hospitality means love of the stranger or love of the foreigner or love of the other. Hospitality, that's what it means. That's the root word. And throughout the New Testament, we're commanded, practice hospitality, offer hospitality, show hospitality to each other, but also to strangers, Hebrews 13 says. So a hospitable lifestyle was modeled by the Apostle Paul and by Jesus, of course. Because we loved you so much, we were delighted to share with you not only the gospel of God, but our lives as well. So hospitality isn't, we talked about sharing the gospel. So some of us may not be familiar with that. Usually what we mean is making sure that people know that God has extended his grace to us through the cross. Jesus died in our place, and you can receive the gift of forgiveness, of having a guilt-free life, and as scripture says, no longer having your sins held against you. That's one description in the Bible, because of what Jesus did for you. So sometimes we limit the gospel to, oh, that thing that happened at Easter and these three things in that prayer that you pray. Yes, that's the gospel, but the gospel is more than that. It's all the story of Jesus, the life of Jesus, the ministry of Jesus. All of that is the gospel. The gospels, right? Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. It's the whole story of his ministry and his life. So Paul says it's not just about sharing with you the gospel or propositional statements that are true. You're a sinner. Jesus died in your place. You can receive that free gift of eternal life by repentance and faith, but also our lives as well. Now, the person who shared the gospel with you first, if you're a Christian and you've received the gift of faith and forgiveness and repented of your sin, you said, Jesus, come in, I'm a follower of yours, I'm a disciple of yours, I'm going to obey you, I'm going to follow you. My guess is the person who introduced you to that, or to Jesus, probably shared their life with you as well. It probably wasn't a disembodied head. Now, you might have been looking at a talking head on a video and they told you about Jesus and that was it. It's possible. It happens all the time. I even know people who have become a Christian and they saw a John 3:16 sign in the end zone at an NFL game, right? And they're like, what is John 3:16? They look it up and go, oh, wow, Jesus died for me. I'm going to put my trust in him. It can happen. But you know what's more common? Somebody who loves you, cares about you, has walked with you, has dwelt among you, is incarnational and relational, said to you, hey, have you thought about following Jesus? Because he's totally changed my life. And you're going, you're a credible person because I know you love me. I've watched your walk. It matches your talk. In other words, you're a credible person, a mother, a father, an uncle, a friend. You've watched them, right? Sharing their lives with you. That makes a huge difference. They've lived a hospitable life. I remember in my first year of college, I was having serious questions about my faith. Okay, I'd grown up in a solid Christian home, went to Christian school, grade 8 all the way to grade 12. I got to university, college, and people were throwing out stuff, and it was like, okay, whoa, I do not have an answer for that. I don't know, like, can I trust this? Or what about that? Or is this really true? Or is that really true? And you know what I came back to? I remember the authenticity and the reality of Jesus in the life of my parents. And I actually came to a point where I said, well, I can't answer this person. I don't have an explanation for that. But what I cannot deny is the reality of Jesus in the life of my mom and my dad. Jesus is alive. They talk to him and he talks to them every single day. And I know he's done that for me. If he hadn't done it for me, I know he did it for my mom and dad. Now, I had to grow up in my faith, make my faith my own. It's not my parents' faith anymore. I've embraced that for the years, of course. But there was a credibility in them sharing the gospel with me because they were authentic. They were real. They were relational, incarnational, right? They were with me and walked with me. And I saw their lives, and not flawless lives. I saw when my parents made mistakes and things, but they were so quick to say, I'm sorry, or apologize, or say, hey, I was wrong. Let's try that again. I didn't get that right. Such authenticity. I'm very thankful for that. Hospitable lifestyle. But we need to enter into, the beginning of this is really entering into community. So I love this idea of real community. Real community is real messy. But if you stick with it, you'll discover that it is truly a magnificent mess. So, true community always involves interruptions, inconvenience, and mess. So, if we're going to live a hospitable lifestyle, it's going to start with living an authentic community. And if we do, it'll involve interruptions, inconvenience, and mess. Kind of like marriage, kind of like parenting, kind of like your extended family or your family get-togethers. There are always interruptions, inconvenience, and mess. There's no perfect relationship. There's no perfect environment. Um, the mess is part of the thing. That's real community. If you look at the early church in the book of Acts, and then you go through the epistles, the letters from the apostles to those same churches, it's a mess. Lots of messes. The church in Corinth was probably the most messy, but there are many messy situations. But it was real. It was community. So the last 2 weeks, we've talked about 7 ways to live in community, to share our lives. And number 1, like I said, is living an authentic and messy community. And you'll see the other ones there. They're in your notes as well. All of these things are part of sharing our lives. Last week we ended with, normally, sometimes it's best to be silent, but sometimes we do need to use words, okay? So stay in relationship. So today we're going to focus specifically on the art of neighboring. So hospitality is lived out with neighbors. Neighboring. So I call it the art of neighboring. It's not a science, but it's also a book. It's a great book by Jay Pathak and another guy. Can't remember his name, called The Art of Neighboring. There's lots of books on neighboring and hospitality out. And Jay Pathak was a pastor in Denver and developed the concept. So we're going to talk about sharing our lives through the practice of the art of neighboring. So the great commandment comes out of Matthew 22. We looked in Luke 10, okay? The guy comes to Jesus, hey, what does it take to get into heaven? And Jesus says, I don't know. How do you read it? Well, he knows, but he was saying, how do you read it? He says, well, love your God, love your neighbor. And Jesus says, yeah, you nailed it. The guy's like, yeah, but who's my neighbor? It's kind of a good question. So Jesus tells the Good Samaritan story. Oh, neighbor is somebody whomever God puts in front of you, whomever you happen to be walking by, whomever you happen to be driving by, whomever you happen to talk to at the gas station or the grocery store or in class or university or the dorm or wherever. That is now your neighbor. You're in proximity with that person. They are now your neighbor. Boom. That's kind of what Jesus was saying. Okay. The great commandment, love God. Second, love your neighbors yourself. And he basically says the whole law, all of the Old Testament and all of the requirements and really all of the stories and everything, they really are summed up in these two basic commands. Love God, love others. And by the way, if you look at the 10 commandments, I challenge you to do that. You will see a breakdown of about 6 and 4. Love God, love others. You'll see them if you look as a breakdown. So how do we practice the art of neighboring? Let's go through some bullet points here. Take Jesus' great commandment literally or seriously. And by the way, in modern days, that's kind of what we mean. Literally. I mean, seriously. Take it seriously. So that love your neighbor thing, God says, I meant it. I don't know if you've seen that billboard, but I meant that. Oh, yeah. Oh, okay. Love your neighbor as, oh, Jesus really meant that? Yeah, he really meant that. That wasn't just kind of a nice fluffy thing. So take it seriously. I love Linus here. He says, I love mankind. It's people I can't stand. Like people in general, I love them. It's great, but that person or that person, it's those individuals. So it's challenging. But what if Jesus meant that we should love our actual neighbors? So over the last century or so, maybe, or the last few decades, we've gone from, oh, love your neighbor as the person next to you, to, oh, love your neighbor can mean anybody in the world because the world has shrunk. Right? We can be in contact with anybody in the world, travel anywhere in the world, be on Zoom with anybody in the world. Oh, so everybody's my neighbor. So what has tended to happen is we've gone from it really meant your neighbor to, oh, it means everybody, because anybody can be our neighbor now. And now we've kind of forgotten, oh, but it actually really does actually mean my neighbor. Yeah, it actually means your neighbor, the person living on the section next to you, the quarter section, down the range road, next door in your community, wherever it might be, down the hall if you're in an apartment or a dorm. He actually meant it that way too, not just in a ethereal way, a neighbor out there somewhere. I want you to watch a video with me. There are going to be a number of videos. I may have to cut a few short. And this one's by Jay Pathak of the book Art of Neighboring. It's part of a course called Life Shared. I hope it's helpful to you.
I was on staff at a large church, and I loved what I did. But I had a crisis one day, a normal day like any other day, when I came home and my wife had just started inviting neighbors over to share a meal with us. She rolled the grill out, and as people were coming home, she just said, "Why don't you come over and we'll share a meal with you?" And all of a sudden I realized all these people that surrounded me, I didn't even know their names. I was a professional Christian. My job was to help a church get to know the city and the neighborhood. And I didn't even know the people that surrounded my apartment. And as we got to know them at that meal, we started to share life with these people who were going through domestic violence things and dealing with addictions and folks that had all kinds of problems. When I was used to getting into my car to drive to do church ministry stuff, and there were needs all around. And in a sense, we became the pastors of that apartment complex. So when we went to move to Denver to plant a church, we decided we want to take the Great Commandment literally. Not figuratively, literally, which meant we needed to know the names of the neighbors around us, to love them, to serve them, to pray for them. And well, that shaped what became our church. Everyone that came with us, we made a commitment to spend time in our front yards, to share meals with people in our homes, to hear their stories, to pray for them, to pray with them, and learn how to live life together. And in this, I think we took the Great Commandment literally, to love God and love your neighbor as yourself. And your neighbor actually includes your little one. And so that small step opened us up to actually thinking about how cities might change. What if everybody took that seriously? What if everyone that says that they follow Jesus took that seriously? What if everyone took that seriously? We might just see a ripple effect in every city that we're in. Instead of trying to do everything out there, what if we started right here? The step to take is really simple. It requires walking the 20 or 30 feet and doing this really complicated maneuver, which is knocking on their door and then saying, "Hi, I live over here. I don't know your name. I've not had a chance to meet you." If you're new in the neighborhood, it goes better. But if you've been there a while, it can be even more awkward. And here's why. Because you probably knew their name at some point. Like you met them at one point and they just become like cat lady or hey, what's up, dude, bro, man. You have these super shallow conversations that usually revolve around the local sports team or a restaurant that came to town. And you have to go over a little speed bump, this little teeny speed bump that's awkward, where you say, "I know I should know your name. I'm so sorry, but I can't remember." And then my recommendation is that you write it down. We use a little tool that we call block map. It's effectively a tic-tac-toe board. Just on your refrigerator, make a tic-tac-toe board and just write the names of your neighbors. And that way, when you look at them, you can start to remember them. And who knows? You might even start to pray for them. And who knows even further? God might actually begin to break your heart. When you get to know someone's name, something strange happens in our mind when we begin to connect to their story. And we begin to remember parts of their story when we remember their name. And it's the most dignified thing we can do for others, is to know their name, capture pieces of their story as a means of demonstrating we care about them. And I think that's what Jesus asks us to do. He asks us to love people. And by this we show that we're his disciples. That can start somewhere simple by knowing their name, capturing a bit of their story, and then reflecting that back to them. And if you already know the names of your neighbors, here's another step you can take, which is maybe you can share a meal with them. Here's a guess about all your neighbors. Have a guess. They probably eat food. Have a guess. They probably eat food around the same time you eat food. And if you make a little extra food and you let them bring some of their food, we can actually share a meal together. And sharing a meal together is one of the most intimate things you can do. And it's actually one of the most simple things you can do. I believe that evangelism moving forward will be mostly lived out and worked out through hospitality. That people will open their homes and open their lives to connect with others in a way that they can see the life of Jesus and the hope that God has in their lives by just looking at them, by sharing space with them, by sharing time with them. This is what Jesus modeled. If you take the parties out of the New Testament, you don't have a New Testament. If you take meals and the connection that we have around food from the whole of the Bible, you don't have the story of the Bible. You take the Passover. That's a big thing to take away from the Bible. Sharing space and time together where we open our hearts up and ask questions and we live life together is best done around food and around meal in a place where people feel welcome. We all have a part to play, and God is so well pleased to use every single one of us if we're willing. If we say, God, use me, He can use you no matter what.
So great start to practicing the art of neighboring is just meet and greet. Jay was talking about just meet and greet. Hey, I'm sorry, I might have known your name. I've forgotten it. Just be honest. That's usually the best way to do it rather than pretending. Oh, hey, dude. Yeah. Okay. And by the way, I struggle with this. If I don't write somebody's name down, I struggle with it. Okay. So meet and greet. Take a step, or to one author said, just walk across the room. Take just a few steps, or just walk across the sidewalk, or just walk to the next place down the road, or drive if you're in the country in a rural setting. Jesus said, if you only greet your own people, what are you doing more than others? In other words, is there any difference between a Christian and anybody else? The difference between a Christian and everybody else is you don't just greet the people you know and the people you like. We greet people who are outside of our immediate circle of like or enjoy being with or are part of my family. If you're kind only to your friends, how are you different from anyone else? Even pagans do that, Jesus says. What a concept. On the subject of meeting your neighbors, here's another short clip from Tim Hortons.
Hi, I'm Gina from Tim Hortons.
I'm Andrew from Tim Hortons.
We're trying to figure out if people actually know their neighbors or not.
Okay.
We see each other in passing.
I don't know them at all. Would you be interested in having a cup of coffee with your neighbor? Right now? You have an accent. Where are you from there? I'm English. Oh, really? Interesting.
Yeah.
Read a coffee? Yes. How's it going?
Yeah, I came 2 hours ago. Yeah.
It's good.
So, what do you do for work?
I was just gonna ask you. I work in sales.
Oh, okay.
I like the house. Love the house. It's completely renovated. I noticed. I mean, I was watching the whole thing go down, obviously. It must have been really annoying.
So, what do you do for fun?
I mean, everything is kind of the kids.
I just started my new job.
Where did you start working?
I'm a chef.
Oh, yeah, that's awesome. I'm not quite that Canadian yet. I don't know if I'm that Canadian yet. Like, I can't say I've never watched a hockey game on the FIFA.
Why haven't we met sooner?
I know the mom life, the busy mom life. I know sometimes I see you struggling with my too, right?
We have a barbecue this summer,
Definitely. I agree.
and I'll do the dessert.
I mean, maybe we'll have a coffee inside the house or something. Yeah. At least on -5.
So next weekend I'm going to Montreal with my girlfriend. I'm going to Montreal too. Next weekend, getting to know your neighbors more than just knowing their name.
Typically, when I meet neighbors, first you gotta do the hello from a distance.
We see each other, but we don't really talk or hang out. When you actually take the time to start talking to somebody, it's amazing what you can find out that you have in common.
I'm from a different country, and I don't have a lot of family around me, so I consider my neighbors family.
Canada, gain a new friend, meet your neighbor. It's as simple as that.
So meeting your neighbor, yeah, it can be awkward, but we have opportunities all around us. Second, pray for each neighbor by name. Now, Jay Pathak mentioned a block map kind of a thing. By the way, James 5 says, pray for one another. And then in 2 Timothy, it says, pray for all people, right? So we don't just pray for one another, for our family members, for ourselves, for our church family. It says, pray for all people, make intercessions. Intercession means praying to God for someone else. So the Art of Neighboring, the book, provides a block map idea. Ann and I have had this in the last number of places we've been at, Kamloops and Red Deer and here. And it helps us to keep track of who lives around us. Now, on an acreage, or if you live on a range road, it would look different, but it's a similar idea. Who's to the north, south of you, or east or west? Sure, you might be separated by a quarter section or another range road, but the map still applies. And you can adapt it for your own context. So once you have the first name, at least you can write the first name in, and whether or not they have a spouse or whether or not they have kids, and then just write that in. Ann and I had, we filled this out once we got these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8 around us. Then we would go across the back alley or across the street and think, okay, how far out can we go and still know people by name? And then start praying for them. And meeting and greeting was a bit tricky. In Red Deer, I made the mistake of letting the guy across the street know that I was a pastor, and that kind of shut things down. We invited him for Thanksgiving and a post-Thanksgiving, turkey leftovers thing, just informal. And it's like, no. And it's like, okay, I was at his door inviting him over for dinner, and he was single and he'd lost his wife a couple of years back. And no, I was like, oh, okay, well, maybe we'll find something else to do. So for the next 2 years, we just talked across the street, doing yard work and comparing notes. And eventually, yeah, we ended up texting each other from Victoria and Red Deer and this place and that place. And, it took some time. But I was at the disadvantage of him not being open to faith and finding out, I did faith for a job kind of a thing. And so that was a barrier. It was a hurdle to get over. And but we prayed for him. Anyways, another way is by paying attention, being present, and listening. We talked about this already. Philippians 2:4 says, don't look out only for your own interests, but take an interest in others too. So pay attention. And that means sometimes writing it down, recording things, be present to somebody when they're talking to you. Just quick tip. You probably have your own tip. If somebody says, hi, my name is Leroy, you say to them, hi, Leroy. So say the name, right? It'll reinforce it, or find another way to try and reinforce that. So be attentive, listen, be present. Another way is to find common ground. So the Apostle Paul was a genius at this. His EQ, or emotional quotient, or emotional intelligence, was phenomenal. And he put it this way: I try to find common ground with everyone, doing everything I can to save some. I do everything to spread the good news and share in his blessings. So find common ground. So the Apostle Paul was trying to find authentic ways of connecting with people. Not phony ways. Sometimes we try hard to connect with somebody and pretend like we know something about what they're interested in, and we don't really, and we just look stupid. Like me going to a farmer and trying to pretend like I know anything about farming or the RCMP or whatever it might be. I need to plead ignorance and just say, well, tell me about your situation, but it may not be the work that we have in common, or agriculture, or our line of employment, or whatever. But there are other ways of finding common ground. I don't know if you noticed on the Tim Hortons video. Oh yeah, I've noticed you have kids. I've got kids. Yeah, mom life. It's hard. Boom, something in common, right? And it's amazing that you will probably have something in common with nearly everybody. It just may not be your main thing, but maybe a thing you have an interest in. Like, I'm not a pilot, but I have tremendous interest in aviation. So if I talk to a crop spraying guy, or somebody in aviation, or somebody who likes to do simulated, flying and stuff, or somebody who's a pilot, I would just say, hey, I'm not a pilot or anything, but man, I love aviation and learning about how planes work, whatever it might be. And so we try to focus more on similarities than on differences. Does that make sense? So, for instance, I was at the pub the other night watching the hockey game. It's the only place I can watch the hockey game in town, and I had to watch the Canada-US game. Oh yeah, how did that go again? Oh yeah, right. McDavid won it in overtime. Okay, yeah, Canada, pull it out. Oh my goodness. Actually, it was our goalie who kind of kept us in the game, and then McDavid's goal was icing on the cake. But I noticed fairly quickly that the conversation among the limited number of people in the pub eventually turned to politics: who's right, who's left, who's this, who's that, and it kept civil, but you certainly know where people landed on stuff. And so I could have jumped in there and aligned with this or aligned with that. I mean, I was sympathetic to a variety of things that were being said, and but there were other ways that we could connect with people who were there, other than I also vote X or Y or for this party or for that party, or I'm aligned with this or I don't align with that, right? So it's not that we need to be inauthentic or deny what we believe or deny our leanings politically or whatever, or our team allegiances, right? Like I don't pretend like I'm a Flames fan. Like why would anybody do that? Oh, sorry. No, what I'm just saying, I'm an Oilers fan. Okay, but the common ground would be, yeah, Battle of Alberta. It's great, you know. It's hockey. Hockey's, yeah. We have things in common. So yeah, why would I start off with? Oh yeah, so that's a reason to be not friends. Let's find another reason not to be friends. So did you get the vaccine or not? Did you do this or not? Are you pro this or that? Are you anti this or not? Like, okay. Or maybe you could just not say all the things that you believe or feel or think. We can just say fewer things and just hold back. It's not inauthentic not to say what you believe about everything. Sometimes it's wise. Actually, in Proverbs, it says the wise person speaks less. People who speak less are thought of as being wise, even if they aren't. So that's why nobody thinks I'm wise. But find common ground. In other words, focus on similarities and rather than differences. By the way, when I'm in religious circles, of course, other ministerial people, I could focus on the differences. Oh, you do this, or you meet on Saturday, we meet on Sunday, you do the communion this way, we do communion that, you do baptism this way, you do baptism. It's like there are endless ways that we can divide. Now, sure, there are a lot of differences, but when I'm in a group of people, depending on the cause, I was actually on a university campus where I had far more in common as a Baptist or Mennonite with the Muslim chaplain or the Muslim students on campus than I had with most other people on the campus when it came to beliefs about morality, beliefs about society, beliefs about what was true, okay? So we actually had some common ground. That doesn't mean I'm a Muslim or they're a Christian. It just means, yeah, we can talk about this. We have some things in common. It was phenomenal what we had in common, actually, as we talked together. Then practicing art of neighboring involves some accepting, some receiving, and some tolerating. I know these are charged words right now, but let me get into it a little bit. So Romans 15:7 says, accept one another. That word accept actually means receive. So receive people, that's hospitable. Have people at the table, let them sit on your couch, give them a ride, get a ride from them. Accept, receive one another. Then, just as Christ, what did he do? He accepted or received you in order to bring praise to God. We sometimes saying, well, will you receive Christ as your Savior? The question is, does he receive you? Will he accept you? The answer is yes, by the way. So a big part of becoming a Christian is accepting his acceptance of you, receiving his reception of you. Okay, he's done everything necessary on the cross for you to be received and accepted. So be like God, be like Jesus, and be an accepting, receiving person. Then, in 1 Peter 4:8, we have this. Above all, love each other deeply. Why? Because love covers over a multitude of sins. Okay, won't go into a lengthy sermon on that. But your parents loved you, depending on your age, and whether they're still alive. And they probably disagreed with some of your choices. My parents disagreed with some of mine. And they never stopped loving me. Now, Did they excuse my sins? Did they not correct me when I went off and fell off the wagon or something? No, they did that. But I never questioned their love for me. See, love covered a multitude of sins. In other words, love accepted and received me in spite of the things that they didn't agree with me on, or I didn't agree with them on, or even if I was disobedient or I was falling off the wagon. You are going to need to accept and receive. I am going to, and tolerate our neighbors. Okay, if we're going to love our neighbors like Jesus did. This next verse, Corinthians, I think it's 1 Corinthians 9, not second, but 1 Corinthians 9. Don't you see how wonderfully kind, tolerant, and patient God is with you? That word is actually there. His kindness is intended to turn you from your sin. Okay? Now, tolerate doesn't mean he turns a blind eye and pretends like you didn't do something wrong. That's not that kind of tolerance. It's putting up with you and loving you and being kind to you regardless of what you've done. Okay? And then in Ephesians 4:2, Paul says it this way: walk in a manner worthy of the calling with which you have been called. Talking to Christians, with all humility and gentleness, with patience. Those are all good things, right? Showing tolerance for one another in love. Now, why would we need to show tolerance? Because some of us are hard to get along with. I'm hard to get along with. So you're going to have to tolerate some things about me, put up with, bear with. Was another one of the one others. Bear with one another, tolerate one another. Okay? So continue to focus on similarities rather than differences. I'm going to show you a video that will offend some of us. I promise you it will. But I'm asking you to tolerate it for what we can learn from it, what we can observe, okay? Here we go.
I would describe my political views as the mood line.
I'll say that on yes.
Feminism today is no hating.
I would describe myself as a feminist, 100%.
I don't believe that climate change exists. We're not taking enough action on climate change. I think sometimes people go off their high horse and start looking at credible problems that actually exist.
It's absolutely critical that trans people have their own voice.
That's not right. You can't, you're a man, be a man, or you're a female, be a female. Women do need to remember that we need you to have our children.
Could I be kind of sorry to the demonstrators in the highway?
Right, okay, well, I'm an expert at flat packs. If you have any trouble, just watch me.
So just that I've got your instructions here.
I think so.
Maybe okay. There's just a bit there. Describe what it is like to be in 5 adjectives.
Okay. Frustrating.
Dedicated.
Opinionated.
Lucky.
Ambitious.
Offensive.
Solemn. I have ups and downs.
Strong. I can't say attacked. Misunderstood. Name 3 things you and I have in common.
We're both male, we're both confident, and we're both loudly spoken.
We know each other better than people who've known each other for 10 minutes.
Sure. You seem quite ambitious and positive, and you've got this really got a glow. Do you know what I'm saying? Your aura is pretty cool.
I'm sensing, are you former military or something?
People said that, but there is no history. So are you then? Ex-military?
Yeah.
If you're ex-military, I'm very proud of you already. So I grew up in a bit of a rough state. I've experienced homelessness. I've known what it's like to have absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm definitely most grateful just for life.
We've only just met, but I think you're the sort of person that would listen to me and we'd have a discussion rather than, oh yeah, you can hang out with man.
Let's go.
Okay. Well, respect, right, mate? It's another one.
Classic.
Oh, yeah. Especially after we just got a bar.
Yeah.
Okay.
Here, each take a bottle and place it on its corresponding markings on the bar.
Attention, please now stand to watch a short film.
Feminism today is definitely an excuse for misandry, man hating.
If somebody said to me that climate change is destroying the world, then I'd say that is totally piffle.
So transgender, it is very odd. We're not set up to understand or see things like that.
I am a daughter, a wife. I am transgender. I feel like the battle for feminism definitely isn't done. The fight is never going to be over, if I'm honest with you.
You now have a choice. You may go, or you can stay and discuss your differences over a beer.
I'm only joking. Well, I'm having a drink. I'm having a drink. Yeah.
Oh, discuss.
Beer.
Yeah, beer discuss.
Cheers. At the end of the day, I'm reaching out to people, yeah. And even if you wanted to convince people about your point, the productive thing to do would be to sit down. I've been brought up in a way where everything's black and white, but life isn't black and white.
Yeah, I'm just being.
Yeah, smash the patriarchy. I'll give you my mobile number, you give me yours, and we'll keep in touch. I'll have to tell my girlfriend that I'll be texting another girl.
So I promised somebody would be offended, or all of us, depending on your perspective on any one thing. What can we learn? What can we learn from a beer ad? Sorry? Take a risk.
Follow the instructions.
Follow the instructions. Okay, what else? I'm sorry, read the instructions. Anything else?
Keep an open mind.
Keep an open mind. I don't show that to promote or not promote any opinions or even the alcohol or whatever. That wasn't the point of it. The point of it was to get us thinking about what's it like to be in relationship or to be open to relationship with people with whom we disagree, even fundamentally about things. That was the point of it. Not necessarily embracing everybody else's beliefs or believing them, but finding a way to stay in dialogue in relationship with people with whom we don't share as much in common as you like. But we find that we do have some things in common. Sorry?
Sports and politics.
Yeah. Sex, politics, and religion? Yeah. So dialogue really matters. In other words, how will people know that we love them unless we listen, unless we're willing to be a part of a conversation? Okay? Jesus modeled that for us so well. And by the way, he offended many, many people. You need to realize, if you just got offended by that, welcome to religious world where Jesus regularly offended people. Regularly. They're like, that's not right. You shouldn't land that way. You shouldn't have forgiven that person. You shouldn't let that woman put oil on your feet and then rub her hair on it. That's wrong. You shouldn't hang out with those people. You're a drunkard. You're a glutton. You're constantly offending people and pushing it. And even Paul pushing the boundaries by saying, I'm willing to do anything legal and godly if it helps me build a relationship with somebody and points them toward Jesus and his love and grace. Okay, another point, be intentional, purposeful. Nothing says I love you like remembering someone's name and the name of their favorite pet. Doesn't that make a difference? I don't remember everybody's pets' names or everybody's dogs in their farms. You guys are impossible to know all those pet names. Keep having those litters. But I have to ask, how is Cami spelt, Jim? There's 6 different spellings of Cami at least. And I'm like, I got the right the first time, but in the technically, is it Cami or Cami with an IE or a Y or a K or a C or and then there's Abby, the most likable pit bull I've ever met, pit bull cross. And there's so many other dogs. But doesn't it make a difference when somebody remembers your name? But then if they also remember your favorite pet's name, well, that's bonus, right? But write it down, right? Be intentional, be purposeful in your building relationships. And that's what that grid framework is about. So we can put more and more information in that box. And not just to manipulate. This isn't about manipulation. This is about letting people know you care about them and you love them because you remember things about them. Rosaria Butterfield, who wrote the book, The Gospel Comes with a House Key. wrote this: radically ordinary hospitality turns strangers into neighbors, neighbors into friends, and friends into family of God. Hospitality turns strangers into neighbors, neighbors into friends, and friends into family of God. Well, this week, what's going to be your decision, or what's God prompting you about it? Maybe just one of these things, and any one of these things on the screen. I just put them up there for you to consider. These are the points that we just went through together. Which of these might be the simple next step you might need to take? It may take a lot of guts, right? Or it might just be praying for the people that whom you already know. But these are opportunities to take a step forward in neighboring, in loving our neighbor the way Jesus did, and the way He invites us to do so, and do it one at a time. You don't have to know all the neighbors around you at once. Just start somewhere. Start with a very simple step of kindness. It might just be going to them and saying, "I'm sorry, I forgot your name, and I'd like to at least know you. We're neighbors, and if you have a problem, I'd like you to be able to call me, or I'll call you. Like, can we exchange numbers so we can at least, if something's happening, we need each other, we can get a hold of each other." In what way is God calling you, or what specifically? I want to listen to a short testimony of somebody who experienced hospitality. It may be a little different than we're used to hearing it or seeing it in our context, but it's an example of somebody who experienced hospitality in the transformation that it did for them.
My mom left when I was a baby, and my dad raised me until I was 4. My dad thought it was best for me to go to Germany to grow up with his sister. I remember the other day when we went to the airport, and I remember holding on to that gate because I didn't want to leave. I hated my father for leaving me, sending me somewhere. I don't know. When I was 7, I got abused from a neighbor. I hated God. I hated him for all the stuff I went through. And I was like, oh, if you exist, why would you like do this to me, you know? I was looking for a nanny job, and I saw Stephanie's post. You know, I just put an ad out there for a nanny. And so the day that she walked in, we kind of just thought, you know what, this makes a ton of sense. Let's just do this. Matt was on the phone and he was like, yeah, we would love to have you as Riley's nanny, and we would welcome you to our family. And I was like, what? This is crazy. We have so many people coming through this house, and she would ask, like, who are all these people? You know, they babysit your kids and they come over here and play with your kids, and like, why would they do that? So they love our kids, you know, we're really involved with each other, we love each other, we're all part of the same community. So I'd love to check that out. So Matt and Steph invited me to church. It was weird because I'm like, never went to church ever. They were just so nice and so welcoming, right? And I was like, oh, this is like a different experience. Like, I like going there. I think you were advertising for Alpha. Alpha was just coming back. And I said, you know, this would be a great way for you to learn more about who Jesus is. And I was like, okay, fine, I'm gonna go meet new people. And yeah, there was a reason why I went to Alpha. First night, I didn't really interact much with other people. I just like listened and was quiet, I think, the first night. The second night, the third night, I felt like, oh, this is like really powerful. Like I started like engaging more and like asking questions. I think it was the time when it was about forgiveness. It was just so powerful that, you know, he forgave us for everything did, and that he still loves us, right? How can he like love me when I did like so many stuff? You know, how can I forgive myself? How can I forgive people who hurt me? I think that was a moment when the dog I had inside went away and the light came to. Yeah.
When you came home and told us that you wanted to be baptized, obviously we were really excited for her, and we should actually need to baptize her. I was for it. It was really exciting.
Well, it was actually so easy. That's the other thing I can't get over is that I really did so little to like introduce you. I mean, so much of it is you just hearing what was true and then just running with it and diving in on who does that. But then just feel like I'm getting so much credit for doing so little. It's not little. It's like a big, it's huge for you guys to like bring me into your home, trusting me, being in your house, and taking care of your daughter, like showing me this like, oh man, this is this great love God has for you, you should come and experience it too, it's like, without you, I don't think I would have it now, so, yeah.
When I first heard Jay Pappin talk about loving our neighbors, what stood out to me was how accessible it all felt. Praying for people by name, getting to know my neighbors, extending the invitation. It's stuff I can do. It's easy. Well, I know it's not easy, but it's easier than how I often make it. And I guess what I mean is these are the kind of practices that you and I can build into our lives right away. But I don't want you to feel like all this pressure to do it all at once. Just start small. Take one idea and put it into action. Start praying for people that you work with by name, or introduce yourself to your neighbor, or invite a friend to church or to Alpha or to a meal at your home. I found that it's often these small steps that lead to unexpected opportunities. So whatever you do, don't do nothing. Take a step and see what God might do with it. This whole series was meant to help spark a conversation that can lead to new engagement with God and other people in your life. And the beauty of starting a conversation as a group like we've done is that whatever next steps you take, you get to walk them out together, which is way more meaningful and way more fun. And as you share your life and share your faith in Jesus with others, you will get a front row seat to see people's lives transformed by the love of God.